So today will be day 2 of 5.3. So yesterday we reviewed our geometry, our SOHCAHTOA. We did an example. We had to use Pythagorean theorem first to find the length of the hypotenuse. Then we found the value of the 6 trig functions. Then we did another example. I had changed the sides to a 3 and a 5. Again, do Pythagorean theorem or recognize that it was that common Pythagorean triple. Then here were our special right triangles, which is what we're using to find the values of the 6 trig functions, creating triangles on our coordinate plane. So we practice using our special right triangles, finding the 6 trig function values for the sine, cosine, cosecant, secant, tangent, and cotangent of 30, 60, and the 45. And then here's where we started talking about our reference angles. So we're still using our all students take calculus to determine where it's positive and negative. We're also using the 4 quadrants to remember the signs on the ordered pairs as well. So we did these 4 examples. These would be questions on the non-calculator portion of the test. So you would graph this and then draw in your triangle. Remember, we always go back to the x-axis when forming our triangles. So let's try a few more examples. So for this one, it wants me to find the secant of a 210 degree angle. So I'm going to go ahead and graph the 210. So it's positive, so I'm going counterclockwise. So when I go to graph it, I'm going to go 90, 180, and then I need to go 180 plus 30, and that'll get me to the 210. So that would be my 210 degree angle. So when I go to make my triangle, remember it's back to the x-axis. And remember what we went was an additional 30 degrees here, and that's my reference angle. What we need to do is remember what the sides are in relation to the 30, the 60, and the 90. So 60 would be here. The right angle is up here. And then the side across from 30 is 1. The side across from the 60 is the square root of 3. And then the hypotenuse is going to be 2. Now, the hypotenuse is always going to be a positive number. So, however, for the square root of 3 and the 1, depending on which quadrant it ends up in quadrant 3, remember your ordered pair, your x and your y values are going to be negative, negative. Now, you can either choose to put the negatives on the x and the y value, and the y value is always going to be the side that is vertical here, just like the y-axis is vertical. So this is my y, and it's also my opposite to my 30 degree angle. The square root of 3, this is going to be my x value. Notice it's just like the x-axis. It's the horizontal line. This will be adjacent. This will be r, and hypotenuse. And us to find secant. Remember, secant is the reciprocal to cosine. So what we're going to do here for secant, you're going to either memorize it as hypotenuse over adjacent, because it's cosine, remember, is the ka. So if you flip it, or you can also memorize it as r over x, and then fill it in. So my r value is 2. My adjacent side is the negative square root 3. We got to rationalize this. So I need to multiply top and bottom by square root 3. So I would get negative 2 square root 3 over 3. Now, if you didn't want to put the signs on the adjacent and the opposite, remember your all students take calculus. In quadrant 3, only tangent and cotangent are positive. So make sure that you put a negative sign when it's secant in the 3rd quadrant. Let's go on. 135. So let's graph it. So I'm going to go 90, and then 90 plus 45 gets me to the 135 degree angle. Now remember, it's what forms or goes back to the x-axis. So my reference angle is right here. There's my 45. So remember the 45, 45, this is 1, 1, square root 2. And then now what we need to do is, this is x, or adjacent. This is y, or opposite. This is r, or hypotenuse. And then in this quadrant, the signs are negative, positive. So the one here is going to be negative. So cotangent, you're either going to memorize it as the reciprocal to tangent. So it'll be adjacent over opposite, or x over y. So here, -1 over +1, and the cotangent of 135 is -1. So for number 12, here's the picture of the 210 graph. Cosecant, remember that's the reciprocal of sine. So it's hypotenuse over opposite, or r over y. So in this case, it's going to be 2 over -1, which simplifies to a -2. 510, we're going to swirl around a couple times. Okay, so for 510, if I take my angle and I add 360, that's going to get me to -150. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start. So we're going to go around. We're going clockwise when it's negative. I'm going to go around one full circle. That's the 360. But then I got to go another 150. So I'll go 90. And then if I go another 60, that's going to get me to where I need. So if you want to think of it as going forward, 360. And then if you add to get to the next thing, if I add 150, this gets me to the 110. So really what I did was I swirled around one full circle and then 150 degrees more. So I ended up right here. Now remember, what I went here was another 60, but the triangle, it's back to the x-axis, so my reference angle is 30. So what it's taking to get to the x-axis, the 60 will be here. So again, across from 60 is √3, across from 30 is 1, and then the hypotenuse is 2. So remember, adjacent is always x, opposite is always y, and hypotenuse is always r. So they want us to find sine. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, or why should you sin? Y over r. So -1. And then the signs here are negative, negative. So -1 over +2. The r, or the hypotenuse, is always positive. Again, if you think about it logically, all students take calculus. That angle ended up in quadrant 3. The only answer that should have been positive is tangent and cotangent, and we were doing sine. So that's why -1/2 makes sense. So let's try the last one here. So they want us to do tangent. So let's graph this -1020 degree angle. So what I can do here is try to figure out how many times I've got to go around. So if I take my -1020 and I add 360, that tells me I need to go around one time. So that's the first 360 I added. Then I'm going to add it again. So then once I do it again, I get -300. So that's another circle around. And then now I need to go 300 degrees more. So then I'm going to go 90, 180, 270, and then 30 degrees more. So again, the triangle is formed back to the x-axis. So what remains here to continue on is another 60 degrees. And that's your reference angle. So then 30 is up here. Right angle is here. So again, across from 30 is going to be 1. √3 across from 60, and then 2 over here. Signs in quadrant 1 are positive, positive. So tangent, that's the TOA. So tangent of 1020 is going to be opposite over adjacent, or y over x. So opposite, remember, is y. Adjacent here is your x. So opposite over adjacent, square root 3 over 1, just the square root of 3. We're going to work backwards. They want us to find the angle measure when they give us the answer to the problem. So the other ones, we were given like sine of 210, and we found the answer. Now we're finding cosine, and we don't know what angle, but they gave us the answer. So when we do these, there's going to be 2 quadrants that'll give us this answer. So we're going to be finding 2 angle measures that will give us negative square root 2 over 2. Now, on the questions where it's going to have a plus minus sign in front, then we're going to be looking for an angle measure in all 4 quadrants. So what we're going to be doing, in order to find these angle measures, once we figure out what our reference angle is, and our reference angle is either going to be 30 degrees, 60 degrees, or 45 degrees. Now, as soon as I see square root 2, I know my reference angle is 45. That's the easy questions. So for example, all we have to do is draw our 45 degree angle, triangle, 1, 1, square root 2. And then now I need to figure out what to do here. So we already can see it's going to be cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent is 1, hypotenuse is root 2. When you rationalize it, it gives you the root 2 over 2. So 45 is my reference angle, and it doesn't matter which. So really you don't need to do this. You already know your reference angle when it's root 2. But what we're going to do is all students take calculus. And in order to find the angle measures, we're going to go ahead and in quadrant 1, this is where our reference angle is located. So if it asks you for positive root 2 over 2, 45 would be one of my answers. However, it's negative, and cosine is going to be negative here and here. So to find those angle measures, in quadrant number 2, I do 180 minus the reference angle, and that's going to give me 135. So that's my first answer. And then in quadrant 3, the rule is to take 180 and add the reference angle, and that's going to give me 225. So my 2 answers are 135 and 225. Now, if it would have said where cosine is positive, then it would have been quadrant 1 and 4. And to find the measure in 4, the rule is to take 360 and subtract the reference angle, and that would have been 315. So if the question would have said, find cosine, find theta when it equals positive root 2 over 2, then the answers would have been 45 and 315, because this is quadrant 1 and 4 where cosine is positive. But this is going to be the 2 quadrants, quadrant number 2 and 3, where cosine is negative. Rule to find the angle measures. In quadrant 1, this is just the reference angle, and it's either going to be a 30, a 60, or a 45. Then the rule for 2, it's 180 minus the reference angle. And in quadrant 3, 180 plus the reference angle. And then in 4, 360 minus the reference angle. I'm going to label my triangles based off of first the 60 and off of the 30. Now, what I recommend you do is do this one time on your scratch paper so you don't have to keep redrawing this. So this one wants cosine. And I know that cosine, and I don't know if it's going to be the 30 or the 60 that's going to give me this answer. So I'm going to do both so I can see which one gives me that answer. So if I do the 30, remember cosine, that's the ka. So I'm going to do adjacent over hypotenuse. Cosine of 30 gives me 1/2. That's not the answer I needed. So if I do cosine of 60 now, adjacent over hypotenuse, that gives me the answer I was looking for. So I know my reference angle is the 60, not the 30. So now to find the two answers where cosine is negative, I'm going to do my all students take calculus. Cosine is negative here and here. So the reference angle, that's the answer from quadrant 1. But I don't want that answer because I'm not looking for cosine positive. I'm going to use that reference angle though and do 180 minus 60 and get 120, and then do 180 plus 60 and then get 210 or 240, sorry. Okay, hold up. I did the picture up here for cosine. Sorry, this is 60. Sorry. I used the picture up above. This is 60. 60 doesn't work. 30 works. Sorry. Let me fix this. Let me go back. Okay, so I used the wrong picture. So let me start over. Oh, let me leave the pictures there. Oh, I erased. All right. So here are my pictures again. Sorry. 30, 60. So this is 1, root 3, 2. 30, 60, 1, root 3, 2. So when I label my sides off of the 30, this is opposite, adjacent. Then when I do it off of the 60, this is now adjacent, this is opposite. This is still hypotenuse on both. So when I go to do cosine of the 30, the red one, adjacent over hypotenuse, that's the answer I'm looking for. If I would have done cosine of 60, that would have been 1 over 2, which wasn't the answer I was looking for. So my reference angle is 30. So now what I need to do is all students take calculus. Quadrant 1 has the reference angle. But I don't want that as my answer because in quadrant 1, it's positive. I'm looking to see where cosine is negative, and it's here and here. So I'm going to use the rule 180 minus the reference angle, and my reference angle was 30. So 180 minus 30, and my first answer is 150. Over here, it's going to be reference angle, or 180 plus the reference angle. So 180 plus 30, and it's 210. So my two answers for this problem are 150 degrees and 210 degrees. So when you see the square root of 3, draw both triangles and label it. So now for tangent on the next one, remember tangent, that's going to be TOA. So it's going to be opposite over adjacent, or y over x. So if I first do tangent of 30 and use the same picture I did in red, opposite of 30 is 1, adjacent is square root 3. So once I rationalize this, I get square root 3 over 3. I'm trying to get square root 3. So 30 doesn't work. So now let's try the blue picture. Tangent of 60. Opposite is square root 3. Adjacent is 1. Tangent of 60 equals the square root of 3. So 60 is my reference angle. So now if I do my all students take calculus, I'm looking to see which quadrants tangent is negative. It'll be negative here and here. So the rule for quadrant 1 is 180 minus the reference angle. So 180 minus 60, and that's going to give me 120. And then in quadrant 4, it's 360 minus the reference angle. So 360 minus 60, and the other angle is 300. So theta here is 120 and 300. All right, so for this one, notice it's plus minus. So this one is cosecant. So that's going to be hypotenuse over opposite. So again, it's got a square root of 3. So I need to do cosecant of 30 and cosecant of 60 to see which one of these is going to give me this answer. So again, if I look at my triangles up here, so for the red one, hypotenuse over opposite is going to be 2 over 1, which is 2. That one doesn't work. So now if I do the blue triangle and I do hypotenuse over opposite, and then when I rationalize, now it looks like what I started with. So my reference angle is 60. Now this one, it's got the plus minus, so I have to do all 4 quadrants. So 60 will be an answer, 180 minus 60, so 120, 180 plus 60, so 240, and then 360 minus 60, so 300. So all 4 of these are answers. And then the last one, we would do the same thing. Opposite over adjacent. And notice the work I just did for the problem up above. Notice the tangent of 30 gives me the answer that I was looking for. So my reference angle is the 30. And then I want to know where tangent is positive. So here and here. So 30 is the first answer. And then 180 plus 30 is going to give me the other one, which is 210. So 30 and 210. All the 45, 45. Set up your all students take calculus. And then what I recommend you do is do the 45 ahead of time, the 180 minus 45, put the 135, the 180 plus 45, 225, then the 360 minus 45, 315. Have all of this already figured out and do it one time. And then also label the sides on the triangle. 1, 1, square root 2. Remember, this is the hypotenuse. And let's say we wanted to reference this 45. This would be opposite. This would be adjacent. And then do the same thing for the 30 and the 60. So if we draw our triangle, 30, 60, 90. And let's say we first reference the 30. Remember, the side across from 30 is 1. This would be opposite, square root 3, it's adjacent, and then over here, hypotenuse. And this will be a 2. So if your reference angle in quadrant number 1 is 30 degrees, so this is up here in the 45, that's your reference angle. Remember to calculate quadrant 2's angle measure. You would do 180 minus the 30, and that angle would be 150. Quadrant 3, 180 plus the 30, that'll be 210. And then in quadrant 4, it'll always be 360 minus 30, and that'll be 330. Then let's draw the 30, 60, 90. So again, 30, 60, same numbers. However, this time when we label it based off the 60, now the square root of 3 is opposite, this is adjacent, this is hypotenuse. And again, we'll do our same thing. This time though, the reference angle will be 60. And then in quadrant 2, 180 minus 60, and that will give us 120. 180 plus 60, and that'll give us the 240. And then 360 minus the 60, and that'll give us 300 for quadrant 4. So remember, when we're using these reference angles of the 30, 60, 90, remember you're not using your calculator. So again, if you want to either memorize what all the angles are in each one of the quadrants, or quickly sketch this out on your scratch paper, then you don't have to keep redrawing the triangles or recalculating the angle measures. And you're still also using your all students take calculus, and then from there, figure out which quadrants have negative and which ones are positive. Remember, whenever you see the plus minus sign, all 4 quadrants would produce an angle measure.